Okay, this is Jerry Logan talking to you with a discussion question which I have for chapter 3. So, because of the, this being an online course, I haven't had a chance to really interact with students like I usually have been doing in the classroom discussion. And in a lot of classes that I had, somewhere in a Zoom meeting in which I'm able to record and upload and discuss the questions with the students. So, this would what I do have is for chapter 3 weekly discussion questions. I want to go over that today, talk about what's the expectations, and just give you an idea of direction in order to answer the questions. So far as the weekly discussion questions, especially from chapter 1, Introduction to Sociology, you all have been doing a great job in answering the question, following the format that I had up regarding the expectations for the discussion questions. One of the things that I decided with the discussion questions was a chance for students, since we're not in a classroom setting, it's a chance for students to get a better understanding of the chapter, the contents of that particular chapter, and as it relates to sociology. So, of course, I did post up online, Blackboard or D2L, the video lecture that I did of chapter 3, what I've discussed, the concepts of chapter 3. Also put a PowerPoint presentation. So I want you all to review the PowerPoint presentations, and at the same time in the video, I'm discussing the PowerPoint presentations as if I were lecturing. So I'm trying to bring more of an in classroom feeling to you so that you don't feel alienated or it's like, well, I'm away from the class, so I don't really feel a good understanding. So that's why I want to go ahead and upload a video which also talk about the discussion questions. And of course, always feel free to email me if you have any questions. Um, the emails pretty much go straight to my cell phone, so I'm able to answer it. If I don't get back right away, I might be doing something. Of course, if it's Sunday, all my students know a huge football fan, huge Atlanta Falcons fans. I know they're not having a great season right now, but at the same time, I still just into football. So if you do email me on Sunday, remember the game start at 12, 3:30, and 7:30 p.m. So in between, I'm gonna try to answer any questions I have. And more likely, I'll probably be watching football, Monday night football, and Thursday night football. So just during those time frames of football, just give me a chance to be able to respond to it. If you're watching the game as well, hit me up at halftime, and I could just try to go ahead and answer the questions. But anyway, just feel free to email me because I don't want students to be ever confused about anything. But so far, you all are doing great with the discussion questions. I ask that you all continue the same way. So I'm about to go over some of the format for every week in all my weekly discussion questions. So here's the expectation for answering weekly discussion questions. Of course, you'll respond, continue to do so every week. I make announcements with the weekly discussion questions just by week, and you'll respond to each question in the discussion board. I know over a 16-week course, you have more time spread out, but for my students that's in an 8-week course, I know it's for like, oh man, it's kind of crammed in because I only have so many, months and weeks in order to finish everything for the course. And the chapters that I selected for this course is very important to me, and I think they should all be taught into an Intro to Sociology course. Definitely, this chapter on culture and media is huge, so I definitely want to be able to, go over that with you all. So, also, the discussion points can vary a little bit depending on right now. For chapter 3, I just have it at 25 points just to get you all have a feel for it. And then for the 16-week course, I try to definitely keep it at 25 points. Before a 8-week course, the points would increase each week. So in order with the discussion questions, in order to attain the maximum points, you must make sure you do the following. Number one, you have to answer the question roughly in 150 words or less. So it means each particular question. So part of, just say number one, question number one, which I'm about to go over in a minute, you answer that question in 150 words or more. Don't have to just start counting 148. I need two more words. No, you can go on more than 150 words, but I just want a minimum of that. So you're just not answering with the, just the minimum standards of answering the question because I want to make sure you got the concept. So inside of each particular question, there's a question within a question. So that may be two or three questions in, just say, for example, number one. So I want you to be able to say, okay, I have 150 words, not just for each particular question in number one, but for the number one itself. You're able to understand and say, okay, I have 150 words for number one or more, of course. Number two, maybe three or four questions, 150 words or more for the second question. And then on and on to the following other questions. Make sure you answer thoroughly, explain your answers thoroughly on why you took that position in answering the question. Number three, respond with a well thought out answer with your opinion. So going back into the question to numbers two, I do have the PowerPoint presentation. Watch the PowerPoint presentation. Also look over my PowerPoints as well. So I have the video discussing the PowerPoints. There's also the PowerPoints as well. So there is an opportunity, and depending on which course, there's a book involved. Using a book I've used a combination of stuff from different books, but I just wanted you to get as much information as you can, and then some of my students may be able to research and do Google. So, because you all as independent scholars, and so one of the things is you have to, in my opinion, for college students, you also have to develop their mind independently and say, okay, well, I have this definition here, I have this term here, I have the sociological term here. Let me also find a way that I can learn more about it. Especially that's why I expound on my written assignments, 2 written assignments in my course, so that you're able to be more of an independent thinker, scholarly thinker as well. So discussion questions are ways that you are able to be able to answer the questions, but at the same time you're learning, especially if we're not in the classroom setting. So I just want to be able to have these questions out here. I think I'm going to continue it as well once things are a little bit different. If it's not an online course, I'm just going to include them in there as well. I think they're very important for students to be involved and to earn points. So, number 3, you respond well with a well thought out answer with your opinion to 2 of your classmates' initial responses. So, in regards to the discussion question, simply putting, I agree is not a valid response and will not gain any points as a substantial response. So, to get the full 25 points. In this particular section, Blackboard, there's a link for the discussion tab in the D2L I believe it's under communication. You access the discussion board as well. So don't forget to respond to 2 of your classmates' response to get the full credit of 25 points. So here's how I go. There's a question number 1. You answer question number 1 thoroughly, more than 150 words or more. Then you move on to all the questions. It says 5 questions for a particular chapter. You answer all 5, you submit it, and then everybody submits, and then you respond to 2 other students. It has to be 2 students. Because just simply responding to 1 person will not give you the full points. You have to respond to 2 people in order to get the full points. The second thing is that just putting, oh, I agree with you, 1 sentence, 2 sentences, to me, it's not just acceptable. I think when you are responding to another student, you're not more criticizing or something negative. Please, nothing negative, nothing inappropriate, nothing to cause an argument. But just try to be able to expound a little bit as far as the conversation, the professional conversation, in a sense, when you're responding. If you agree to something, give me a good explanation why. If you just don't say, well, I agree with you, this makes sense. No, just kind of expound a little bit, because at the same time, sociology is a study of people, and interacting with others. If you go from a symbolic interactions perspective, so it's just getting a chance to communicate with your classmates as if this was a classroom setting at the time, but at the same time, you're still, maybe assisting another student, which you are helping them to be able to expound on their thinking as well. If they have a particular stance, to say, hey, maybe if you want to do research this piece, I found some information on the internet about this, which could possibly help another student out. So, any questions with this part, feel free to email me. But each week, Each chapter I will be updating the information, going over this again. So let's start with the chapter 3 on culture and media with the first question. So it is in Blackboard at D2L. I just used the word document for this one. So for chapter 3 is, what is your definition of culture? What is it that you mean and you think culture means to you? What is some of the material culture, non-material culture of the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and currently in 2020, and explain for each era. I thought this is funny because in the classroom setting, I asked students about that. So remember, as you all look at the PowerPoint presentations and you look at my video, material culture and the non-material culture, the difference, material culture, your things that can be identified physically, of course, hairstyles, clothing, it can be, even electronics equipment, we talk about that, video games, video game consoles, non-material culture is a group's way of thinking. So, not going to get too much in that. I just want you all to be able to review, know the difference between material and non-material culture, and explain for the 1960s. It's funny because students who are 18, 19 years old, like, okay, I wasn't born in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and none of that stuff. However, it just is funny to me because I ask students about it, so then they're trying to give me their opinion what they thought the 60s was like. So I myself born in 1970. I think about how culture have changed, the material and non-material culture have changed from the 1970s, and especially how technology has changed, entertainment has changed, television, everything's changed. The 80s, 1980s, of course, during the time frame. 1970s had a big afro, butterfly collar. The way I used to dress back then in the 80s came around, I had a jerry curl, dripping all down everywhere, so I had to wear that plastic cap on my head just to make sure I didn't wear. One day I forgot to put the plastic cap on my head and had a jerry curl juice all over the pillow, and I rolled over and then it burned my eyes, and my eyes were hurting, and if it's 100 degrees and I lived in the, if it's in low-income housing and we didn't have no air conditioning, nothing like that, so I had a fan on, so I'm sitting there sweating. That plastic cap will be sweating, but you can mess up somebody's couch if you don't put that plastic cap on your head, as in, I've seen in a movie before. You lay your head back, you got jerry curl juice everywhere, but you had to keep it moisturized. 1990s is a different time frame. I got into college in 1988, so rap music started becoming more and more evolved, and the style of dress changed from the 70s and 80s. We was breakdancing and pop locking and all the other stuff like that. We had more of a different type of style. The 90s came, which has become more fashionable a little bit. Being from Chicago, a lot of people started dressing more like a New Yorker. As you knew, a New Yorker, he had the Timberland boots on, or we used to call the Jodeci boots back then. So Chicago, we was dressed in 40s, dressed up, long trench coat, had a Dob hat. That was Chicago. New York had a hoodie, jeans, and boots on. So now see how the culture has changed. Currently in the 2020, just want to know what's the style for young people. I look at different, I'm into the hip hop culture because teaching sociology. I feel I need to be more connected with the younger generation. So in 2020, I'm looking at this, how things are going on in 2020. As far as how young people, the music have changed, rap music, trap music, drill music, whatever they call it, mumble rap. I listen to all that stuff like that. I follow the young culture. So just kind of talk about the different time frames, material, non-material culture. Non-material culture, of course, back then, civil rights movements were going on, the Vietnam War, people were hippies back then. Currently what's going on in 2020. Just kind of talk about for each area the material and the non-material culture. Any questions on number 1? Feel free to email me. Number 2, what are some of the cultural traditions? And I like asking students about this. What are some of the cultural traditions that you and your family passed on from one generation to the next? For example, holiday traditions, food. I like to eat. I'm 6'1", 245 pounds or something like that. I like to eat, so I love hearing about different family traditions. What I learned about, because I have people of all cultures from all over the world, different parts of Europe, Asia, India, people from down south in the United States, people who have different ethnic backgrounds, which is always good to hear about. For instance, with the food, I had one student who's Italian, and she stated that her family recipe they passed on from one generation to the next, and it started from years and years, and you have to be inherited, and you have to be, you know, be ready for it, and you have to pass it on, which I always find it unique. I had a student from families from Ireland. He talked about how they had uh, written materials from his great great grandfather. Some of the things that Ireland immigrants, some of the treatment, the negative treatment they received when they arrived to the United States, different celebrations and quinceañera I learned about, a whole bunch of things. So just talk about that. I'm just curious to hear about different students from all over the world. So if your family has a history, if from down south, I have students from Africa, some mix, maybe African Jamaican culture. From if you're from different parts of Asia, Japan, China, Vietnam. I've had all kind of students from Russia, everything. So just kind of talk about that from both sides of the family. I'm just curious about it because it's always fun to know. Number 3, what is culture shock? It's the disorientation that people experience when they come into a contact with a fundamentally different culture than from your own. So culture shock, first, I always use the example if someone was to go to the Amish community and have to live there for a week. That's a form of culture shock. It's like, wow, they live totally different. It's not nothing negative. This is their culture. This is how they live, which is okay. And just personally, give me an example of culture shock you have experienced. I have students from different parts. I have students from Mexico saying, well, a kid couldn't go get beer because it's a family town, and he's going to be 10 years old. He can go get a beer, because they know he's giving it straight to his family. Some people say they were in different parts of Europe, and 16 years old, you can drink a glass of wine, or you can drive a car. It's different. So it's different things. Let me know if it's, for example, if you've been in another country, another culture experience, etc. Number 4, how does the media influence a culture? So we look at how different things, CNN, Fox News, we can look at all kind of different forms of media. And I know younger people have more access to blogs. I mean, I'm not familiar with all that stuff, blogs and I guess podcasts, I don't know. It's different forms of interacting with the media. TikTok, YouTube, stuff like that. Even though all my videos are being uploaded to YouTube, but I don't have a TikTok and none of that channel like that at YouTube. Well, I'm, YouTuber, I don't know what to call them, but I'll have that. Mine is strictly for education purposes. So just talk about how the media influences the culture. It can just be the music, how the music shapes the culture. Depends on whatever music you listen to. It can shape how you feel. And the culture itself of music, for instance, Beyonce, she's a very positive person for a lot of my students. This young ladies say, well, we love her music. She's uplifting. So that also plays a role too. In 2020, what are the pros and cons that media plays in shaping the culture in the U.S. and across the world? I didn't grow up in the 1970s. We didn't grow up with internet, all that other stuff, Facebook, laptops. We didn't have none of social media sites. You can imagine how it was, and you can talk about that in question number 1. How we had none of that stuff, and so now you can just view everything across the world because it's a global economy, and globalization is very important. Read over reflection theory plays a role in shaping the culture. I'm not going to get too much in the definition. I need you all to do some homework on that. What does reflection theory plays in shaping a culture? I know y'all said, man, there's a lot of questions. He's asking a whole lot of questions. Yes, I am. I want y'all to get it and understand it so when you walk up out of my class, you're like, okay, I got it. So I'm a theories person. Number 5, do more research and define the functionalist perspective, symbolic interactions perspective, and the conflict theory in chapter 3. What is your opinion of each theory? Gotta read, gotta check out my video, learn more about it. Not gonna get into it right now. Number 4, explain the difference between the functions perspective, symbolic interactions perspective, and the conflict theory in regards to chapter 3. Now, 7, explain the culture of a subculture that you're familiar with. For example, gamers, technology, musicians. There are a lot of people who are gamers. My brother-in-law is a very good guy. I approve of him. Very good guy. He is a gamer, and I go over there and to visit them, my nephew, my niece, and I went by there one day, and all his buddies were, playing video games. During the time, working on my doctorate in business, so we talked about uh, technology, and I started asking questions about what is this particular guy who made millions of dollars by having game accessories. And these guys schooled me so much on technology and gaming. And it's a $1 billion industry, and they have so much knowledge about it. So the subculture is the fact that they are gamers, and they got, I don't know what's the name of it. They have a conference where there's video game people. They come test out the new video games. I don't know. People who dress up as superheroes, Star Trek, and they have this event where people go. It's different things. So different people, depend on the music you listen to. So remember, a culture, subculture is a culture within a culture. So kind of talk about that if you are familiar with that, if that you're a part of, you're familiar with. And then what are some of the norms, values, and language and beliefs for that particular subculture as well? Because they have their own language, they have their own style, they have their own, remember norms, expectations of right behavior. So kind of talk about that as well. Again, answer the discussion question first and come back, complete 2 responses. Remember, 2 responses to your classmates at the same time to ensure completion of your 2 responses. So make sure you respond to 2 people. Try to do it back to back. Don't say, I'm going to do it now, I'm going to do another one later. And make sure when you do your discussion questions, do them early as possible so other students can have a chance to respond to it. Remember, respond positively. And if you do disagree with someone, do it in a professional manner. Don't do anything that's going to cause an argument. I'll read over and like, okay, wait a minute. And be respectful of all people's culture. And in this particular section, we're talking about different cultures. And ethnocentrism, remember, that's judging the culture based on your own standards. Practice cultural relativism, where you're trying to understand the culture. And if you have a question regarding it, I've had a student from Africa. He talked about how his uncle had 3 or 4 wives, and all of my students was like asking him questions about the culture. And it was cool because it was asking legitimate questions. They never experienced that. I had a student who from India. She was a part of an arranged marriage, and the students like, wow, they asked questions. So more of intriguing questions, supportive questions, and not so much anything negative. So any questions or comments, let me know. That's all I have for chapter 3. Hopefully this can help you all out, and make sure you turn them in on time. Don't try to do them 2 weeks later. Try to do this discussion question with the date that it's due. All right, y'all have a good one.